maybe you're not broken, but maybe you're just in the process of being reborn. Rumi said, when you find yourself, the world loses its power to hurt you. But how can you find yourself when you live surrounded by smiles that hide knives? The quietest pain is not the one that screams. It's that feeling you get when you realize that the person who hurts you is pretending to love you. It's an invisible wound, inflicted by familiar hands. The betrayal that doesn't come from enemies, but from those who called you important. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt like you were being emotionally drained by someone who smiled while they were emptying you? This is the wound that Rumi knew well. The wound of false affection, of love that manipulates, from a presence that weighs heavily, but that you insist on keeping, because you confuse attachment with love. But nobody talks about it. Nobody tells you that sometimes you need to distance yourself not out of pride, but for emotional survival. Nobody warns you that the most dangerous poison is the one served in cups of affection. And that's why this video exists. Because you need to break free from those who smile at you, while hiding a blade behind their back. You can feel it, can't you? That silent doubt, that discomfort that grows every time you feel something is wrong, but you can't explain it. You start to blame yourself. I think you're exaggerating. But his soul feels it. And Rumi said, don't look outside for what can only be healed from within. You are trying to heal yourself on a battlefield, trying to find peace where there is emotional manipulation, trying to be a light in a place that dims its own shine. And there comes a time when you have to make the hardest choice. Distance yourself from those who pretend to love you, so you can finally learn to truly love yourself. That's not coldness. This is healing. But how do we identify these silently destructive presences? How to recognize the disguise of false affection? How can we break free from cycles of pain disguised as care? That's what we're going to talk about now. And I promise you, this truth might hurt at first, but it will set your soul free. Comment below if you've ever felt this invisible pain, if you've ever blamed yourself for walking away from someone who hurt you in a delicate way. This space is yours. And now, let's delve deeper into this truth that no one has dared to tell you. You are not alone. Many souls feel this same wound, the pain of being surrounded by people who silently drain your light, while pretending to care. That's why this video isn't just content, it's a mirror, a whisper to your soul. And if, at any point, you found yourself in this kind of relationship that sucks you dry, that slowly wounds you, comment here, I felt it, because putting what hurts you into words is already a step towards healing. If this topic resonated with you, don't let this video pass you by like just another one. Leave a like. This helps us continue to bring reflections that speak to the soul. Subscribe to the channel because this journey of liberation is only just beginning, and you don't have to walk it alone. Turn on notifications, because every week you'll receive not just a video, but a call back to yourself. Now take a deep breath, because what comes next will show you why, even surrounded by people, you feel so alone. And why is that? It's not your fault. Have you ever felt like the world hurts you, even when you try to be strong? That everything affects you, because you haven't yet found yourself completely? This silent pain you carry in your chest, which no one sees, but which consumes every piece of your emotions, is not an exaggeration, it's not weakness, and it's definitely not all in your head. It's the result of a life trying to please those who hurt you in silence, trying to keep close people who only know how to offer you emotional crumbs disguised as affection. You give yourself completely. You surrender yourself. You try to be understanding. You try to justify the unjustifiable. And in the end, what's left is you, alone, tired, and with a broken heart. This happens because many times we grow up believing that we need to fight for love. That true love is the one that survives the pain, that endures silently, that bears it in the name of connection. But Rumi already said, you have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. And opening your heart in this context doesn't mean letting everyone in. It means recognizing who no longer deserves to stay. The pain of being hurt by someone you trusted is unlike any other. It's not a pain that screams. It's a pain that whispers during the night. It's the emptiness you feel even when surrounded by people. It's the feeling that no matter how present you are, your soul is somewhere else, trying to escape something you can't name. And that's the cruelest trap. You start to believe that the problem is you. You begin to mold yourself, to become silent, to hide, to avoid displeasing, to avoid conflict, to maintain peace. But what kind of peace is this that demands you erase yourself? What kind of love is this that demands your absence so that the other person feels comfortable? This is not peace. This is emotional imprisonment. And if you feel you are living like this, know that you are not alone. There is a multitude of sensitive souls living this same dilemma: how to continue being a light amidst those who live in the shadows. And perhaps your greatest wound isn't what they did to you, but what you allowed to continue, out of fear of losing, out of fear of being alone, out of fear of seeming harsh or ungrateful. But I'll tell you something you might need to hear right now. Walking away is also an act of love. Love for yourself, love for your emotional health, love for your soul, which silently cries out for freedom. The invisible problem many face isn't a lack of love, but an excess of giving to those who never intended to care. And when that happens, you start to develop shells, to protect yourself, to close yourself off. But this shielding also prevents you from reconnecting with who you truly are. And that's why many people, even after distancing themselves from those who hurt them, continue to feel pain. Because physical separation doesn't resolve the emotional bond. You need to go further. You need to look inside, understand why you were attracted to this type of relationship, why you accepted less than you deserve, why you became accustomed to normalizing contempt disguised as love. And perhaps the answer isn't pretty. Perhaps it involves old memories, unresolved stories, childhood wounds you preferred to bury. But if you don't face this now, you'll continue repeating the same cycles. You'll change people, but maintain the same pattern, and the world will continue to hurt you, because you'll still be vulnerable to what pretends to be love. Rumi said, "Don't settle for stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend." And awakening that legend means realizing that true love doesn't diminish, doesn't hurt, doesn't demand that you abandon yourself. It elevates, embraces, heals. But before finding that love outside, you need to rediscover it within. And perhaps that's why the universe has placed certain pains in your path, not to destroy you, but to awaken you. If you feel trapped in this kind of invisible pain, this video is an invitation, a call to stop pretending everything is okay, to break the cycle of silence and name what's hurting you. Here, you don't need to pretend to be strong. Here you can simply feel and begin to transform. And if something inside you was touched by these words, comment below. I recognize the pain I've kept silent for too long, because it's only when you acknowledge it that healing truly begins. The pain you feel doesn't come from outside. It stems from a disconnection from your essence. And I know that upon hearing this, you might question yourself. After all, how can something so profound be so invisible to most people? But that's exactly how it works. Silently. The most devastating emotional pain isn't the one accompanied by screams or fights. It's the one that settles in slowly as you drift further away from who you truly are. It grows every time you say yes when you mean no. Every time you tolerate a toxic presence just to avoid feeling rejected. Every time you swallow your tears and feign strength, just to maintain the illusion of control. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." And opening your heart in this sense is not romantic poetry. It's a sacred brutality. It's allowing everything you've repressed, all the unspoken emotions, all the inner cries, to finally have space. Because only when your heart breaks do you have the chance to touch what is most true within you. And that's where healing begins. Not before. Not with shortcuts, not with distractions, but with surrender. This pain that accompanies you is a reminder, a sign that you are living a version of yourself that is no longer authentic, a copy molded by the expectations of others, a distorted reflection of what you believe you need to be loved. But the further you stray from your truth, the more hostile the world seems, because the world has the power to hurt us, only when we are disarmed of our essence. When we don't recognize ourselves, everything affects us. The words of others become truths. Judgments turn into condemnations. Rejection becomes proof that we are not enough. But when you start to return to yourself, something changes. You realize that true love, the kind that embraces and transforms, doesn't require effort. It doesn't constantly hurt. It doesn't manipulate, doesn't drain, doesn't punish, and more. It begins within you. This is the spiritual root of your pain. You don't suffer simply because someone treated you badly. You suffer because, on some level, you believed you deserved that treatment. Because there's still a part of you that hasn't been embraced. That's still waiting to be validated by someone from the outside. But that someone will never come. And this isn't a sentence. It's liberation. As long as you seek healing and accepting others, you will remain trapped. Because no one out there can validate what you yourself have not yet recognized as sacred. And that's why you repeat the same patterns, get involved with similar people, and experience the same disappointments. It's not bad luck. It's not punishment. It's the unconscious trying to show you where presence is still lacking, where self-love is still lacking, where reconnection is still needed. The root of the pain isn't in what they did to you. It's in what you believed about yourself because of it. It's in the stories you created to justify why you're not worthy of complete love. And it's these stories that need to be broken, one by one, until there are no more narratives of abandonment, rejection, or inadequacy left. Because when that happens, what remains is silence. And this silence isn't emptiness. It's space. Space for your soul to breathe again. You need to understand that your pain is a language. It speaks of everything that is misaligned, everything that needs to be reviewed. And if you have the courage to truly listen to it, it will show you where the knots are, the blockages, the repetitions. It's not a pretty or quick process, but it's the only path to liberation. Spirituality is not about running away from pain, but about going through it consciously, with presence, with soul. Rumi invites us to look at this pain as a portal, as an entry point, because it is there exactly where it hurts the most that the key lies. The key that opens the door to reunion, the return to your essence, to your truth, to the strength you forgot you had. And perhaps this is your moment, the moment when you stop asking the world to understand you and begin to understand yourself. Stop begging for crumbs of love and begin to offer yourself the banquet of deserving. You no longer need to carry this guilt, this exhaustion, this feeling that you're always fighting to be enough. You already are. You always have been. But the pain blinded you. And that's okay. That's also part of the journey. The important thing is that now, you are here, you are listening, you are feeling. And that in itself is already the beginning of healing. If these words touched you, leave a comment below. The key lies where it hurts the most, because naming is the first step to transformation. What no one told you is that the world's power over you ends when you remember who you are. This may seem too simple, but that's exactly why almost no one manages to live this truth. Because truly finding yourself requires the courage to unlearn everything you've been taught about love, value, worthiness, and presence. Finding yourself isn't a pretty destination, full of certainties and immediate peace. It's a process of crumbling. It's looking into the eyes of the masks you created to survive, and having the honesty to say, "This is not me." The hidden key that so many seek outside, in books, in relationships, in gurus, in distractions, was never external. It was hidden all along behind your wounds, buried every time you kept silent so as not to lose someone, kept in every memory where you erased yourself to fit into a space that wasn't yours. Because the deepest truth is that the pain, this pain that insists on visiting you in moments of silence, is not punishing you. It is trying to wake you up. You don't need permission to return to yourself. You don't need to wait for the other person to change, for the situation to improve, for the world to fix itself before you feel peace. The return to your soul begins when you stop searching outside for what has always been internal. It's a movement of reconnection, a reunion with the most authentic and forgotten part of who you are. And that's why it hurts so much, because for years, perhaps decades, you've been pushed away from that essence. You've been molding yourself, adapting, trying to fit into places and relationships that demanded a distorted version of yourself. But there is no cure in distortion. There is no peace in denial. And there is no true love where you need to abandon yourself to be accepted. The key, then, is not in resisting pain but in going through it, in listening to what it has to say, in recognizing that each tear, each emptiness, each loss was leading you to this point, the moment when you decide to stop running away from yourself. When Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you," he was talking exactly about that, about how pain, however cruel it may seem, is an opening. It is a passage. It is a calling. But this key only works when used consciously. It's not enough to understand it intellectually. You need to feel it. Breathe it in. Honor what was lost. And allow a new possibility of being to emerge from the midst of pain. A version of yourself that is no longer defined by those who rejected you, nor by the stories they told about you, but by what you now choose to honor within yourself. Spirituality is not a place of escape. It's a place of return. It's coming home, within your heart. It's sitting with yourself and for the first time not wanting to leave. And perhaps now you realize that all this searching, all this exhaustion, wasn't because of love for the other person. It was longing for yourself. It was your body, your soul, your energy asking you to stop betraying yourself, to stop trying to heal in environments that only hurt you, to finally break this cycle where you believe you need to strive to be worthy. You already are worthy. You always have been. But your vision has been clouded by pain, by trauma, by unconscious repetitions. And the key, the one you've been searching for so long, is your return to a state of truth, a state where you don't need to prove anything, where simply being is enough. This doesn't mean the world will stop trying to hurt you. It means you will no longer allow those wounds to enter unfiltered, because when you are whole, centered in your soul, even the chaos outside becomes just a distant echo. What once brought you down now simply passes through you. What once tore you apart now becomes a lesson. And this isn't about becoming cold, but about becoming free. Inner freedom is born when you are no longer bound by the gaze of others, when you no longer need validation to feel real, when you understand that your value lies not in the reactions of others, but in the peace you build within yourself. And perhaps this is the greatest turning point of all, realizing that the spiritual path doesn't distance you from the world. It strengthens you to exist in it without losing yourself. The world may remain the same. People may continue to fail you, judge you, try to erase you. But when you remember who you are, none of that can destroy you anymore, because you no longer live from lack. You live from presence, presence of soul, presence of truth, presence of self. If this passage brought back any memories, a pang in your chest, or revealed a truth you've been avoiding, comment below. I came back to myself. Because writing this down, even silently, is a pact, a reminder, a key turning in the lock of your own reunion. Perhaps you're still seeking validation from someone who never truly saw you. And perhaps that's exactly what hurts the most. Realizing you're emotionally begging for something that, deep down, you always knew wouldn't come. You give yourself, you bend over backwards, you explain yourself, you wait, you try to understand the other person, you try to be understood, but nothing seems enough. The other person remains distant, cold, unpredictable. Sometimes it even seems like they're there, but you feel in your soul that you're alone even when accompanied. And the most painful thing is that, even knowing this, you stay. And this staying comes at a high price. Before each rejection tore you apart. Not just because it hurt, but because it seemed like a confirmation of something much deeper. The feeling of not being worthy, of not being good enough. And that's where the most common and silent emotional trap lies. That of seeking in the eyes of another the answer to a question that only your soul can answer. Do I deserve love? But how could the other person give you that if they don't even know who they are? How could someone see your depth if they are blind to their own? You begin to realize that most of the time you weren't loved completely, because you accepted crumbs as if they were banquets, because you confused presence with connection, because you interpreted silence as peace when it was only absence, because you heard beautiful words from someone who had no intention of backing them up with actions. And this cycle of illusion repeats itself. You wait for change. You believe in the promises. You bet again, until a part of you gets tired. But it's not ordinary tiredness. It's a weariness of the soul, an inner exhaustion from trying to be seen where there is emotional blindness. Maybe you're still in that relationship. Maybe you're still trying to hold together a structure that collapsed a long time ago. Maybe you're still stuck with someone who tells you, I like you, but treats you like you're invisible. And that's not love. That's attachment. It's habit. It's fear of loneliness disguised as emotional loyalty. But you need to be very honest with yourself now. The longer you stay in that place, the further you get from yourself. And when the distance between you and your essence grows, the whole world starts to hurt. After waking up, after reconnecting with your truth, you begin to understand that rejection wasn't a punishment. It was a mirror, a reflection of how you had abandoned yourself. Because those who are whole inside don't accept half measures. Those who love themselves don't beg. Those who recognize themselves don't submit. The pain of rejection transforms. It doesn't disappear, not immediately, but it changes location. It ceases to be the center of your identity and becomes merely a reminder of where you shouldn't return. And that's how healing happens, not in a linear or romantic way, but as an internal process of separating what makes you grow from what only consumes you. You start to ask yourself, who am I when I'm not trying to be loved? This question changes everything, because in it you find not only the key, but also the door and the path. There are many examples. The woman who spent years trying to prove her worth to someone emotionally unavailable. The man who remained silent in the face of veiled criticism, believing that he was the one who needed to change. The person who stayed, even knowing they were being emotionally betrayed, because they were afraid of not finding anyone else. All these scenarios have one thing in common: the absence of self. When you are not present within your own heart, any external presence seems better than silence. But this silence is sacred. It is in silence that the soul speaks. It is in silence that the reunion happens. And perhaps right now, at this very moment, you are feeling the beginning of this reunion. Perhaps something inside you is saying, enough. And it's not an angry enough. It's a mature enough. A silent enough that comes from the recognition that you deserve more, that you can love without needing to erase yourself, that your presence is already enough, and that true love doesn't need to be taken from anyone. It flows, it finds, it sustains. When you begin to live from this new inner place, everything changes. The people around you begin to reveal themselves. Some distance themselves because they can no longer manipulate you. Others draw closer because they recognize your light. But most importantly, you are no longer trying to be accepted. You are being. You are breathing your truth. You are inhabiting your own body with emotional dignity. If you saw yourself in any part of this story, comment below. I deserve to be seen in my entirety, because writing this is more than a comment. It's an act of courage. It's a reminder to your own soul that you're ready to stop begging for what should already be sacred within you. You are not what they did to you. And perhaps that's the phrase you need to hear now, deeply, with presence, with truth. You are not the abandonment you suffered. You are not the rejection that silenced you. You are not the contempt that made you shrink. All these experiences happened, yes, and they left marks. But none of them has the power to define who you are. What defines you is not the pain you lived through, but the choice to continue living consciously, despite it. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life?" This phrase carries more than poetry. It carries a gentle denunciation of the way we have been living, trapped in pain in the past and the narratives we have learned to repeat as if they were our identity. You have been conditioned to believe that you need to heal by being accepted by those who hurt you. But that is an illusion. Healing begins when you stop trying to convince others of your worth and start remembering it on your own. The shift in consciousness doesn't happen noisily. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It's that subtle moment when something inside you changes place, when what once paralyzed you now only teaches you, when you no longer respond the same way to old triggers because you realize you no longer need to fight to prove who you are. True strength isn't in resisting, it's in releasing, in surrendering, in taking a deep breath and saying, "I don't need to carry this anymore." This moment of awakening is silent, yet powerful. It's when you realize that everything you were seeking outside, love, approval, acceptance, validation, was already available within you. But to access it, you need to silence the noise of everything they told you you should be. You need to silence the voices that called you difficult, too sensitive, weak, exaggerated, because in truth, you were only trying to live with your soul exposed in a world that teaches you to hide. When that turning point happens, you begin to realize that the most liberating forgiveness isn't the one you offer to the other person. It's the one you offer yourself, for having remained silent, for having allowed yourself less, for having accepted incomplete love, thinking that was the most you could achieve. You forgive yourself, and in that forgiveness there is freedom, there is return, there is space to rewrite your own story. You begin to walk differently. You speak with more presence. You look people in the eye without fear. You say no firmly And yes, consciously. And not because you want to control the other person, but because you have finally recognized yourself as the guardian of your own energy. You understand that you can no longer continue giving pieces of yourself to feed those who never knew how to reciprocate. And it's not arrogance, it's self-love, it's emotional maturity, it's spiritual wisdom. This empowerment isn't a shout, it's a return, a new beginning, a reconnection with the quietest and most sacred part of your being. And when that happens, you stop worrying about what others think. You understand that your truth doesn't need applause to exist, that your journey doesn't need to be understood to be valid, that your soul doesn't need to mold itself to fit in. It only needs to remember its origin, its essence, its wings. And at that point, you begin to realize that the life you thought you needed to achieve was already available, but not outside, inside, at the center, at the core of your own being. And everything that seemed distant now begins to make sense, because you are no longer chasing after it. You are allowing yourself to be, and that changes everything. The pain persists, the world remains demanding, people continue to carry their own shadows, but none of that paralyzes you anymore, because now, you know where you come from, and more importantly, you know where you're going. It's not about having all the answers. It's about walking with more awareness, with more truth, with more soul. And perhaps for the first time, you are ready for that, ready to stop surviving and start living with presence. If you felt this calling within yourself, comment below. I remember who I am, because writing this is a silent commitment to your own awakening. It's confirmation that you're ready to stop crawling and finally fly. The question isn't, why does the world hurt you? The real question is, why do you still believe you need to be accepted by a world that doesn't know your soul? This inversion changes everything, because it shifts the focus from the pain to its origin. It takes the gaze away from the other and returns it inward, to a more intimate, more raw, more real place. Most deep emotional wounds aren't caused solely by what the other person did, but by the meaning you gave to their actions. By the silent interpretation that if someone abandoned you, then you weren't worthy. If someone rejected you, then you weren't enough. But who taught you that? This reflection needs to be done with an open heart, not to blame yourself, but to free yourself. How many times have you felt broken because someone didn't look at you the way you wanted? How many times has your self-worth fluctuated according to the approval or lack thereof from someone who didn't even know your depth? And if you stop to think, you'll realize that much of your suffering doesn't come from reality itself, but from the expectations you created, from the silent hope that, one day, the world would validate you. But the world doesn't know who you are. The world doesn't know your soul. The world most of the time is too busy trying to survive its own pain to see the silent beauty you carry. Have you ever stopped to consider how many of your decisions were shaped by the attempt to fit in? Choices made not because they were true, but because they seemed acceptable. Relationships maintained not out of love, but out of fear of being alone. Words swallowed to avoid appearing weak. Prolonged silences to avoid causing discomfort. And all of this, in the name of an acceptance that never came, because you were trying to be accepted by an emotional system that could never embrace you. You were presenting your soul to eyes that only see the surface. And now, perhaps for the first time, you realize how much this hurt you, how exhausting it was to try to be understood where there was only noise, how frustrating it was to offer your best to those who only knew how to receive half of it. But you don't have to live like this anymore. You can now make a different choice, a choice that begins with a simple movement. Stop trying to be loved in places that demand that you abandon yourself. This reflection is an invitation, a dive, a pause in the rush of the world so that you can listen to the voice of your soul. And this voice is subtle, but firm. It doesn't shout, but it insists. It says, you already are. You are already whole. You are already light. You are already enough. But you need to remember this every day. You need to cultivate this reunion like someone watering a seed that is still sprouting, because self-love is not born as an explosion. It is born as a whisper, a gesture, a presence, a no said firmly, a yes pronounced with authenticity. You no longer need to seek recognition. You need to recognize yourself, and this process is not selfish. On the contrary, it is spiritual. It is sacred, because the more you recognize yourself, The more you align yourself with your mission, with your truth, with your essence, and the more aligned you are, the less vulnerable you become to external chaos. What once shook you now simply passes. What once hurt you now teaches you. And what once seemed essential, now you realize it was just a distraction. Reflect calmly. Observe where you are still trying to prove something, to whom you are still explaining yourself, in what spaces you are still diminishing yourself. Because these are the points where your energy is being drained. These are the places where your soul is being forgotten. And every time you distance yourself from yourself, life loses a little of its shine. But the shine can return. It always can. You just have to choose to go back inside. Choose every day to be loyal to who you are, even if it costs you the disapproval of those who have never truly seen you. The world may not know your soul, but you can, and that's enough. That heals, that transforms, that sustains. True strength is born from reconnecting with your essence, and from that place, everything changes. Choices change, relationships change, the way you look at yourself changes, because now you're no longer trying to fit in, you're simply being, and being is the beginning of everything. If this reflection resonated with parts of yourself that you thought no one saw, comment below. I choose to recognize myself, because this simple gesture done in silence is an act of healing. It is a declaration of freedom, and it is above all a return to what has always been there, patiently waiting for you to remember. Your soul never needed the world's permission to exist. Close your eyes, breathe, but really breathe. Not that quick, automatic, anxious breathing that the world has conditioned you to have. Breathe slowly, with presence, with intention. Inhale as if you want to bring back the forgotten pieces of yourself. Exhale as if you are willing to let go of what no longer belongs. Feel the air going in and out. Feel that you are here, now, and here, in this instant, the reunion begins. Most people live in a state of flight. We run away from ourselves without realizing it. We run away through social media, empty conversations, emotional addictions, distractions disguised as productivity. But have you ever wondered why silence is so unsettling? It's because in silence no mask can resist. In it, everything that was hidden begins to resurface. And that's why today's exercise is so essential, because it invites you to stay, to stop running away, to look inward with the eyes of the soul and not with the eyes of fear. Ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching? Don't answer hastily. Let the answer come from deep within, not from your mind, because your mind will try to tell you what you do, what you've achieved, what others think of you. But your essence isn't in labels. It's in what you feel when everything is silent. It's in that instant when you allow yourself to be vulnerable with yourself. In that pause where you don't need to be strong, productive, perfect. You just need to be. And perhaps in the beginning, what comes is emptiness. A strange feeling of no longer knowing who you are. That's okay. That's also part of the journey. The reunion doesn't happen in a hurry. It demands truth. And truth sometimes comes after discomfort, because to find your light, you need to cross your own shadow. You need to face the parts you hid, that you ignored, that you tried to bury under layers of pleasantness and expectations. This exercise is not a magical ritual. It's a gesture of presence, a spiritual choice, a decision to no longer abandon yourself. When you sincerely ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching? What begins to emerge is the purest part of your soul, the part that doesn't need to prove anything, the part that doesn't need applause, the part that doesn't depend on the acceptance of others to feel alive. It is this part that needs to be heard, because it is the bridge to your healing. And if you delve deeply into this exercise, you'll begin to realize that much of what you believe yourself to be was built upon the expectations of others. That much of what you do, feel, choose, desire, is not truly yours. It's a reflection of family, social, and emotional patterns. But by listening to this silence honestly, you begin to separate the noise from the essence. You begin to let go of what no longer serves you. You begin finally to inhabit your truth. Rumi said, "You are searching for something that is, in fact, already you." And perhaps that is the answer. Perhaps everything you have always sought in books, people, achievements, has been whispering inside you all along. But to listen You must be silent. You must stop. You must have the courage to look yourself in the eyes, not the eyes of the mirror, but the inner eyes, those that see beyond the surface, beyond the pain, beyond the story. Spiritual practice is simple, yet profound. Sit in silence every day, even if only for 5 minutes. Close your eyes and ask, what is my soul trying to tell me? Then don't force answers. Just listen. Just stay. Because the simple act of being present with yourself is already a break with the world that keeps trying to take you away from yourself. It is already an act of courage. It is, in itself, a return. And little by little, something begins to change. You start walking more lightly. You begin to make decisions that respect your energy. You begin to naturally distance yourself from those who only know how to drain you. You begin to get closer to people who see you, who listen to you, who recognize your truth. And none of this happens by magic. It happens because you went back inside. It happens because you stopped betraying yourself. It happens because you made the most sacred move there is. You decided to listen to yourself. This exercise doesn't end when you open your eyes. It continues with every choice you make, with every yes that comes from within, with every no that protects your peace, with every act of self-care that breaks the pattern of emotional abandonment. Every time you breathe consciously, you say to your soul, I've returned, and it replies, I never left you. If this practice resonated with something within you, if it touched a space that has long been dormant, comment below, I'm coming back to myself. Because this comment is more than just words. It's a symbolic act, an energetic seal that you choose from now on to be true to your soul, even when the world tries to pull you away from it. When you find yourself, you no longer need the world to validate you. And that's not just a pretty phrase. It's a spiritual reality so profound that it can completely change the way you live. Because what hurts most of the time isn't what the other person says, does, or thinks. What truly hurts is how much you believe that defines who you are. But when you remember yourself, when you reconnect with your essence, everything around you loses that power. The world ceases to be an emotional battlefield and becomes simply the stage where your soul moves with more lightness, more truth, more awareness. You begin to realize that you no longer need to beg for love, that you no longer need to explain yourself to be understood, that you no longer need to adapt to fit into places that were never yours. When you find yourself, there is no longer a need to belong to spaces where your essence is diminished. Because true belonging happens within. It's a feeling that arises from the coherence between who you are inside and who you choose to be outside. And at that point, you start making different choices. You no longer accept invitations that distance you from yourself. You no longer maintain bonds that imprison you. You no longer strive to sustain relationships that survive at the cost of your silence. You begin to protect your energy as one protects something sacred. And do you know why? Because you understood that you are. You are sacred. You are complete. You are home. And home doesn't beg for shelter. The world loses its power to hurt you because you remembered who you always were. And this remembrance isn't an event. It's a process. It's a constant return. Every day you will be challenged to forget. Every day something or someone will try to disconnect you from your essence. But now you know you can come back. You can breathe. You can close your eyes and ask yourself, where did I lose myself today? And that question alone is healing. Because when you find yourself, you are freed. Not from the pain itself, but from the prison of thinking that pain is who you are. You stop identifying with what happened and begin to identify with who is growing from it. You understand that the wound is no longer the end of the story, but the turning point. The crack through which the light enters. The break that reveals the soul. And then, something changes. Your gaze changes. Your voice changes. Your silence changes. Because now everything you do comes from a more genuine place. You begin to move with soul, to position yourself with presence, to love with wholeness, to say no without guilt, to say yes with soul. And this new state of being is not about isolating yourself. It's about integrating. It's about becoming whole again in a world that constantly tries to fragment us. Deep down, you understand that you are no longer willing to live in pieces, that you are no longer willing to give others the power to decide your worth, that you are no longer willing to live on the margins of your own existence just to please or be accepted. When you find yourself, your presence changes the atmosphere. Not because you impose yourself, but because you vibrate with truth. And truth has a silent weight that no one can ignore. This moment, this reunion, is the beginning of a new way of walking, no longer as someone seeking approval, but as someone offering presence, no longer as someone needing to prove themselves, but as someone who simply is. And this presence heals. It heals you. It heals others. It heals the environment, because it is a presence that comes from within, not from the ego, but from the soul. And perhaps now, after everything we've discussed here, you're feeling something different inside. Maybe you can't name it yet, but a space is opening up. A clarity is emerging, a silent desire to live more truthfully. Honor that. Nurture that. Nourish that. Because that's the starting point for everything that comes next. If you've made it this far and felt that breath of reunion within you, comment below. I am the home you've been looking for. Because this phrase, more than a comment, is a reminder. It's a way to seal everything that was awakened in you in this video. And so that from now on you never forget. When you find yourself, no one else can make you lose yourself. If you've made it this far, to this last breath of truth, it's because something inside you is in motion. And that's no coincidence. It's a sign that your soul is ready to remember, to rediscover itself, to be free. This channel isn't just a place for words. It's a space for silent healing, for spiritual reunion, for reconnecting with everything the world has tried to erase from within you. Subscribe to the channel and walk with me. Here, each video is a mirror of your soul. Each word is a seed of healing, and each encounter is an invitation for you to stop surviving and start living with presence. If you stayed until the end, leave a like, not as an automatic gesture, but as confirmation that something here made sense to you, that you recognized something within yourself that you no longer want to abandon. And now, it doesn't stop here. The next video appearing on your screen is a continuation of this awakening. Watch it too, because your journey of reconnection is only just beginning, and you no longer have to walk it alone.